Hello, I am the Script Doctor and welcome to the channel. We're back with another episode of Star Trek Lower Decks. This one titled Veritas, meaning the goddess of truth in ancient Roman culture. It is also a frequently used title on TV shows in the last 20 years, such as Witchblade, CSI New York, Smallville, Sanctuary, House of Lies, Castle, and many others. It is in no way the most common episode title to be used, but its frequency is closing in on titles like A Family Affair, Home, and The Trial. Veritas is Latin for truth, which makes sense as the show is centered around a trial where our Lower Decks crew are thrown in a cell and raised on a platform identical to what we see in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. There, an alien character with an eye patch, much like Christopher Plummer's character in the same movie, questions our team on various stardates to speak truthfully regarding their senior officers. I don't remember this guy's name, but I do know the actor who voices him, Kurtwood Smith. And so I will refer to this character as Kurtwood Smith because that's a cooler name. Kurtwood Smith was also in Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country as the President of the Federation. Yes, he's been in other Star Trek productions, but this one episode's framing device is quite specific to a scene in Star Trek VI, so we're going to keep it focused here for now. What we have here is an episode composed of partial comedic stories where the writers either weren't intellectually equipped to develop them into full episodes, or didn't have enough time to develop them into full episodes and so put them all into one. It's essentially a clip show that is loosely tied together with a central plot of rescuing someone from the Romulans. The episode is broken up into 4 parts, part 1 being the trial itself and the remaining 3 from the officer's perspective. The first is with Mariner as she gives testimony regarding her duty shift on the bridge. The team is debating who is the more memorable badass. Boimler argues Roga Danar from the Season 3 episode of Next Generation, The Hunted, and Mariner argues Khan, going so far as to literally cite the episode title Space Seed in her argument.
That's the joke.
Due to Rutherford having messed with the Red Alert speakers, they are unaware of the ship's situation and discover that there is a crisis and are late to their stations. Mariner advises that she and Boimler fake it until they can piece together what is going on, so as to prevent Rutherford from getting into trouble. When they get to the bridge, the senior staff are in the middle of the confrontation and the 2 bridge stations are empty, which is incredibly strange because on a starship these stations are manned at all times. Whenever a senior officer leaves, another officer operates the station as relief or a substitute, but on the Veritas, that doesn't happen? We have no idea how long these stations have been empty, so not only does it look bad on Mariner and Boimler, it also looks bad on the senior staff for not questioning why there isn't anyone at Ops or the helm. Also, why would they have station shift changes during an emergency? Would it not be in the best interest of the crew to have those at their stations when the alert sounds to remain given the emergency? During a Star Trek Red Alert, the officers are to man their stations, so even if Boimler and Mariner aren't there, the previous shift would be remaining until they're relieved. And even in an emergency when Mariner and Boimler show up, they wouldn't take over because they don't have context, so the original officers would remain until the situation is resolved. It would be funnier if, while the senior staff is distracted, Mariner and Boimler are trying to discreetly convince the original officers to let them take over, but they refuse because they're late and they're in the middle of a red alert. Add in the consequence that Boimler and Mariner will have to take on an additional bridge duty shift to cover their absence, and then we get a debate between Boimler, who wants more bridge time, and Mariner, who doesn't. It's a simple rule for writing. Mine as much as you can from your concept, especially when it's conflict, because then you would have a dynamic where the senior staff are negotiating with the cliquettes, Mariner and Boimler are negotiating with their fellow officers, and neither of them are getting what they want. Add on the fact that it's only a matter of time until the senior staff picks up on Mariner and Boimler's tardiness, and now you've got 3 levels of easy-to-follow conflict in your scene for comedy. But I guess that's too complicated for these writers to balance, so it's better for them to shave it down to a single dimension. That single conflict involves the captain asking Mariner her thoughts. She pulls off the ruse, but Boimler is lost when asked for options, and starts suggesting ship maneuvers that upset the senior staff. The captain's decision is to send the cliquettes a message. Mariner acknowledges the order and fires phasers. Why is Mariner firing phasers from the ops console? And isn't firing phasers the tactical officer's duty, and from his station behind the captain? Luckily, I'm not the only one questioning this action, as the captain freaks out and clarifies that her intentions were to invite the cliquettes to dinner, which would be a communications officer's job, or, since this is the next-gen era, the tactical officer's job. Was it me, or did anyone else find it strange that with the introduction of Star Trek The Next Generation, the tactical officer and chief of security was also the communications officer? I mean, Why the triple duty for that one position? It would be a little frustrating and probably explains why Worf was so eager to shoot something, because most of his day was sending out hails or alerting the captain of incoming transmissions. The Clickets open a channel again to the Cerritos so we can hear the captain ordering his men to target the Cerritos bridge. What a redundant moment. Why not just skip that and have the Clickets ship return fire? What does it matter to the audience that they're targeting the bridge? But I digress. Kurtwood Smith. Oh, the subtitles inform me that Kurtwood Smith's character is Clar. Yeah, I'm still calling him Kurtwood Smith. He becomes enraged when Mariner isn't telling him the information he wants and orders her to the Tank of Contempt. What is the Tank of Contempt? Just a water tank with alien eels. How do eels equate to contempt? I would have preferred something a little more humorous, like an actual Tank of Contempt, where a voice emits from the walls with scornful or disrespectful remarks. Why else call it that if you're not going to have fun with it?
You're a selfish insult to humanity. Your arrogance brings harm to others. You're not actually funny or a fun person.
Boimler rushes to Mariner's defense and Kurtwood Smith holds off on the eels. As our lower decks team questions the value of a map of the neutral zone, Tendi telegraphs that she knows more than what she's letting on. Kurtwood Smith asks Rutherford to provide more information. We learn from this exchange that Rutherford's first name is Samanthan. Is that supposed to be a combination of Samantha and Jonathan? Is that the joke? Is it even necessary? I'm going to move along because I'm giving this name more thought than the writers have. Rutherford's story is one that is very fractured, but still coherent. Rutherford is ordered by Shax to update his implant with Romulan details and is taken on a strange covert mission to steal an ancient Romulan bird of prey from a Vulcan museum. We cut to various parts of the mission that Rutherford is aware of, but like us, do not know all the details because his implant is constantly updating and rebooting him. The joke is that he's completing his part of the mission while on autopilot from his cybernetic implants. This update and reboot pattern eventually causes him to warp out their transport and crash on a Gorn planet and interrupt a wedding. How he escapes from this situation, we do not know. This frustrates Kurtwood Smith, and so Rutherford is dangled next to Mariner above the eels as Tendi tells her story. When Kurtwood Smith objects to Tendi's hiding of details, he threatens her with death by eels. Tendi is willing to face such death in order to not break her commitment to Starfleet and classified missions. Kurtwood Smith allows her to continue her testimony. We see her story where she is assigned to clean the conference room, and Ransom mistakes her presence as cleaner for his mission and not the actual officer on cleaning duty. The plan is to use a map of the neutral zone that the captain obtained from the Clickets earlier to retrieve a package and have the cleaner extract them if they get into trouble. Ransom's team with Tendi take the stolen bird of prey from Rutherford's story and enter Romulan space. Tendi attempts to explain to Ransom that she may not be the cleaner he thinks, but is constantly interrupted by an Andorian officer who freaks out every time the Romulan ships in the area conduct scans. It's supposed to be a tension raiser and repeated over and over again to elicit a laugh, but it's just boring and eats up a lot of time. There's no setup to the Romulan scanning, no payoff regarding the scans, just an interruption fueled by panic from a single character. After the joke goes on too long, the bird of prey arrives at Romulus and the team beams down to extract their package. While Ransom and his men retreat from Romulan security with the package, he orders Tendi to do her thing. Tendi, not knowing what that is, decides to engage the Romulans and proceeds to kick their ass, impressing Ransom and the rest of the team. Somehow, Tendi, I guess, heard their praise of her because it's part of her story. They return to the Cerritos where Tendi is complimented for her contribution, and she returns to cleaning the conference room. Kurtwood Smith is aghast at Tendi's story.
You did not do martial arts on multiple armed guards!
Well, because this is your first time with Lower Decks, Kurtwood Smith, I hate to break it to you, but this type of skill set for female characters in the current iteration of Star Trek is par for the course. Pushed to his limits, Kurtwood Smith sends Tendi into the Tank of Contempt, dropping the three into the water, activating burners, I suppose to heat up the water, and let the eels do their thing. But wouldn't the burners boil everything to death, including the eels? Or would the eels kill them first, and then the burners are to kill the eels? Why call this the Tank of Contempt when it would be far more accurate as the Tank of Confusion or Redundancy? Kurtwood Smith pleads with the team that all this torture and this interrogation would be over if they could just explain what the bridge crew did. Boimler steps forward and admits that they can't because they weren't informed. Boimler delivers a passionate speech about how he reads all the logs of the bridge crew and that they're constantly screwing up and that they're not infallible or perfect. That spot is reserved for Mariner, and that they dive headfirst into the unknown with the best of intentions. He recites a number of irrelevant references from other Star Trek shows, including Q, where the writers completely misunderstand the concept of the character, and have him throw the bridge crew into a wacky game to prove humanity is worth saving. First, Q is eccentric, not wacky. His actions are educational, not abstract. When he plays with the crew of the Enterprise, he is teaching them something of the galaxy and of themselves. In Encounter at Farpoint, he challenges them on their temperance, the ability to resist a knee-jerk response with an unknown that may be aggressive. He warns them of the Borg, that there are creatures that have no room for compromise, at least until that idea is ruined by Voyager. And he teaches Picard how valuable and fragile life is by giving him a second chance to avoid being stabbed in the heart. This is what Q likes to do, but the writers of Lower Decks just think he's a simple trickster. There could have been a great Q episode here where he forces Mariner to take responsibility of a situation, perhaps put in command against some real challenge or face obstacles that she's not ready for, and reveal some information about why she chooses to remain an ensign with the Lower Decks crew. You know, something that could be deep and fun, especially if whatever is challenging Mariner is something silly and inconsequential versus something epic. Getting back to the trial, which actually isn't a trial but rather a celebration at a venue. The team calls out the strange aspects of their situation which Kurtwood Smith has answers to, except for the Tank of Contempt. We get no explanation as to why this would be a function at a celebration. Aboard the ship, the bridge crew gives commendation to the Lower Decks team for defending Starfleet while thinking they were facing death, and the captain suggests that they will be more forthcoming with information to the rest of the crew. The Lower Decks team asks a bunch of questions about the covert mission and why it couldn't have been done in a more efficient way, or why another ship wasn't involved, and the captain backtracks her transparency idea and shuts their questions down as being classified. The show ends with another Q appearance and a reference to Picard quoting Shakespeare and making wine. I've never seen Picard make wine aboard the Enterprise. Lots of tea, though. But the sheer denial of Q by Mariner and Q's acceptance of the denial is quite peculiar. Overall, this episode doesn't give us much in any ways of character development. One thing I have noticed is that for a comedy, this series is not quotable. Not for me, at least. No lines from this show that I can think of that could be used in common conversation to bring levity. Perhaps this show's title should have been Qualimus, after the god of stupidity, instead of the derivative Veritas, as the running theme in this episode is how our Lower Decks team aren't getting fully informed regarding the ship, but are also failing to pay attention themselves. The characters end where they started, with nothing new learned about themselves. It reinforces how they are afterthoughts by the senior staff, stuff we as an audience already know. And for any series, even one that is episodic, there must be a takeaway of some kind to make watching the episode worth the time. It missed the mark with irony, based on the title and situation, and borrowed heavily from Superior Trek, which made me think of better episodes instead of the one I was watching. So what was the purpose of this episode to begin with? To prove that no one in Starfleet is perfect? That they're not really the best of the best? To subvert expectations? Because that's not storytelling. That's just drawing out an insult for 22 minutes. And from my experience, drawing out a single insult without a new perspective or realization is lazy, and only done by those that follow the lessons of Qualimus. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have anything to add to this episode, please leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and never forget, it all starts with the script.